The warning scream came first, a high-pitched electronic shriek that every fighter pilot prays they'll never hear.
Major Connor Sullivan's hands went ice cold as his radar warning receiver erupted across multiple frequencies because 3 Chinese J-20 stealth fighters had just locked fire control radar onto his F-22 Raptor at knife fighting range 60 nautical miles over the Philippine Sea, and this wasn't a routine intercept. Someone in Beijing had just decided today was the day to find out if America would actually fight back. And what happened next became the most intense aerial combat since the Cold War. At 1647 hours, Sullivan's world changed forever when his HUD symbology shifted violently from passive tracking to active threat, display painting 3 amber diamonds at 45,000 feet with intermittent radar returns showing the Chinese were using sophisticated electronic countermeasures saturating the electromagnetic spectrum with noise designed to blind the most advanced fighters ever built. This was aggressive, this was provocative, and according to every intelligence briefing, this was exactly what Beijing would do right before pulling the trigger. Captain Rachel Lewis, Sullivan's wingman, transmitted with practiced calm that completely belied the gravity. "Falcon, I'm showing intermittent radar returns. They're using electronic countermeasures." The Chinese weren't hiding anymore, they were jamming American sensors, and according to rules of engagement, weapons quality radar locks meant hostile intent. Sullivan's morning had started with routine alert rotation at Palawan forward operating location. A converted civilian airfield putting F-22s within 10 minutes of contested waters, where Lieutenant Colonel Davis delivered the briefing with the weight of someone who'd seen actual combat over Iraq, explaining that Beijing was testing American resolve by repositioning surface-to-air missiles around the Spratly Islands, while State Department wanted de-escalation, but Pentagon demanded shows of force, leaving pilots caught in the middle expected to fly aggressive patrols without starting World War III.
But avoiding conflict became impossible when AP-8A
Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft reported weapons-quality radar locks from Chinese fighters. The kind of tight beam illumination that preceded missile launches, and the Chinese had painted that unarmed patrol. Plane gathered targeting data, then broken off at the last second in pure intimidation psychological warfare screaming, "We can hit you whenever we choose." Sullivan and Lewis scrambled within 4 minutes, racing toward the same fighters, now treating them like target practice. The tactical geometry deteriorated rapidly as the lead J-20 climbed to 55,000 feet, gaining the high ground while forcing Sullivan into an impossible energy decision climb: to match and burn precious fuel or maintain altitude and accept tactical disadvantage, while Lewis executed defensive maneuvers diving low to bracket the Chinese formation. But the enemy immediately adjusted, with 2 fighters pursuing her descent while their leader held superior position. And these weren't inexperienced pilots. This was professional maneuvering, speaking of serious training and combat discipline. Sullivan's fuel gauge showed 7,000 pounds 40 minutes at current consumption, but far less if this went kinetic. And his thumb hovered over the weapon release button he was explicitly forbidden to touch until authorization came. "Falcon Magic, you are authorized to deploy defensive countermeasures if locked by fire-controlled radar weapons. Remain tight." Translation: Washington still hoped this could be resolved without bloodshed, while 3 stealth fighters positioned for attack profiles. The pause stretched into eternity, 3 seconds of silence, while closing speeds exceeded 1,000 feet per second. And somewhere in a climate-controlled command center, officers were arguing with politicians, consulting with diplomats, the entire chain of command paralyzed by the weight of consequences, because one wrong decision could trigger economic sanctions, diplomatic crises, potential military escalation nobody wanted, but everyone feared. Then the radar warning receiver tone changed: not search radar, not fire control radar, but missile guidance radar with active tracking. "Missile launch! Missile launch!" Lewis's voice cracked with the first hint of stress Sullivan had heard all day. "Valkyrie defending." A PL-15E had come off a Chinese wing pylon, and someone in Beijing had just resolved the political calculation with explosive propellant. The theoretical war became actual combat in the time it took solid rocket fuel to ignite. "Falcon, you are weapons free. Repeat, weapons free. Engage hostile aircraft." The authorization came within 2 seconds, because someone at Indo-Pacific Command had been waiting with finger hovering over the approval button, knowing this moment was inevitable. Sullivan rolled, inverted, and pulled, diving toward Lewis's position while simultaneously targeting the lead J-20, his thumb finding the weapon select switch. "Fox 3. The AIM-120D dropped from the side bay motor, igniting with brilliant white flash, accelerating to Mach 4 as it climbed toward the high-altitude enemy. The missile's onboard computer receiving constant updates from Sullivan's radar, adjusting intercept solution in real time, while he broke left in an HE turn that compressed his chest and narrowed his vision to a gray tunnel. Braking right, chaff deployed, missile tracking. Lewis's voice cut off for 3 heartbeats that felt like hours then. Splash missile detonated aft. I'm clear, no damage. Relief flooded through Sullivan, immediately suppressed by tactical necessity because his AMRAAM was still tracking toward Bandit 1, 13 seconds to impact. The Chinese pilot would be hearing missile warning tones, making the same life and death decisions about how to defend, while the second and third J-20s broke formation immediately, one diving after Lewis, the other turning toward Sullivan's position in standard Wolfpack tactics executed with textbook precision. Good kill, Falcon, Splash 1, Bandit 1 is down. Sullivan's missile had found its target after 48 miles of supersonic flight, ending in proximity detonation and catastrophic structural failure. 1. Chinese pilot was dead, his $300 million aircraft scattered across 10 square miles of ocean, but there was no time to process what that kill meant because Lewis still faced a J-20 at 4 miles, closing too far for guns, too close for reliable missile shots, against maneuvering targets. She pushed throttles to military power, diving to build kinetic energy, the currency of air combat, while her radar warning receiver indicated the Chinese fighter attempting lock. So she deployed chaff, creating radar mirrors that confused targeting solutions, but then the enemy launched. The PL-15E came off his wing pylon as Lewis broke hard right, pulling 9 Gs, while simultaneously deploying maximum countermeasures, the world narrowing to a gray point as blood drained from her head despite the anti-G-Zoot's crushing pressure. She grunted through forced exhales, keeping blood flowing to her brain, while the missile tracked through her chaff with sophisticated signal processing. So Lewis rolled, inverted, and pulled again, creating vertical scissors that forced the missile to pull lid angles it couldn't sustain. The PL-15E's motor burned for 6 seconds before exhausting propellant, leaving the weapon to coast on momentum, and physics became her ally because every defensive maneuver forced recalculation, and every recalculation burned energy the weapon couldn't recover. The missile passed 200 feet below her aircraft, proximity fuse failing to detonate. Valkyrie defending, missile defeated. But the J-20 maintained pursuit 3 miles behind and slightly high, trading altitude for speed, keeping pressure on, refusing to let her extend and reset. So Lewis decided to show him what American training produced. She chopped throttle and deployed speed brakes, her airspeed bleeding rapidly from 450 knots to 300, and the sudden deceleration forced the Chinese pilot to make an instant decision: overshoot or match her speed. He chose to match, pulling into a climbing spiral that bled off excess speed. Tactically sound, but exactly what Lewis wanted. She waited until he was committed, aircraft nose high and energy depleted, then slammed throttles to afterburner, and the twin engines roared to 70,000 pounds of thrust, accelerating her Raptor through the merge. They passed canopy to canopy at combined closure rate exceeding 1,000 knots, close enough that she could see the Chinese pilot's helmet through cockpit glass for a fraction of a second. They were 2 human beings staring at each other across 50 feet and an unbridgeable gulf of national loyalty. Then they were passed, each pulling hard to reverse position and gain advantage for the kill-in. Dogfighting, the oldest form of air combat, unchanged in fundamentals since World War I. Lewis's F-22 had thrust vectoring, movable engine nozzles directing exhaust to change pitch without relying solely on control surfaces, and the J-20 didn't have that capability. That was her edge. She pulled into him, accepting 8 Gs to tighten turn radius. The Raptor rotating inside his circle, gaining angle with each passing second through thrust vectoring, creating pitch authority that seemed to defy physics. The Chinese pilot saw it happening and reversed, trying to deny her the shot, but she'd already committed. Riding the edge of controlled flight, and her AIM-9X Seeker had found his exhaust signature with tone pure and steady, perfect infrared lock. Valkyrie! Fox 2! The Sidewinder leapt off the rail, corkscrewing through air as its imaging infrared seeker tracked the target, and the Chinese pilot deployed flares and broke hard, left executing textbook defensive procedures. But it wouldn't save him because the AIM-9X ignored the flares.
its seeker distinguishing between burning magnesium and turbine exhaust.
The aircraft disappeared in a flash of white light as the 20-pound warhead detonated. Splash 2. Meanwhile, Sullivan faced his own crisis when a new contact appeared, Bandit 4 AKJ-500 airborne. Early warning aircraft maneuvering for attack run on the E-3G AWACS, providing their radar coverage. And losing that aircraft would kill 15 American aircrew and shift tactical balance decisively. "I'm breaking engagement with Bandit 3, I've got Bandit 4. Sullivan rolled, inverted, and pulled, diving away while pushing throttles into afterburner, his airspeed climbing rapidly past Mach 1. Fox 3! His second MRM dropped from the bay, accelerating toward the KJ-500. But Bandit 3 had followed. The J-20 Sullivan had been fighting reversed, course diving toward his 6 o'clock positioning to either stop him or force defensive maneuvering. Sullivan maintained heading, refusing to defend, giving his missile the best possible chance. But his radar warning receiver screamed as Bandit 3 achieved lock. So he broke hard, right deploying countermeasures, even as he maintained forward velocity, when missile warning tone sounded PL-15E inbound. He pulled 8 Gs, then 9, then 9.5, his body weighing over 2,000 pounds under acceleration when the missile detonated 400 feet aft, close enough that the blast wave struck like a physical blow. Falcon is hit, flight controls compromised. Warning tones erupted everywhere, left stabilizer damage. Hydraulic pressure dropping his Raptor shuddered, yawing left despite neutral control inputs. The aircraft wanting to roll, dive, spiral into unrecoverable departure. Falcon Magic Bandit 4 is down. His AMRAAM had found its target. He'd saved the AWACS by destroying the KJ-500, but the cost was his own aircraft. Sullivan checked fuel, 3,000 pounds remaining, barely enough to make Palawan under normal circumstances. But with battle damage, the mathematics became questionable, and his aircraft suddenly pitched down 30 degrees as hydraulic system 2 failed completely. Falcon declaring emergency. "I'm not going to make it back." The realization settled with grim finality. His aircraft was dying, systems failing one by one. At 20,000 feet, the Raptor departed controlled flight, rolling inverted and entering a flat spin. And Sullivan tried everything: opposite rudder, neutral stick, reduced power, but damaged stabilizer made recovery impossible. Falcon ejecting! He pulled both ejection handles and explosive bolts fired. The canopy separated. A rocket motor beneath his seat ignited, producing 17 Gs of acceleration, launching him away from the dying aircraft. Drogue chute deployed at 15,000 feet. Main parachute followed at 5,000, jerking him upright as 40 feet of nylon filled with air, and he hit the South China Sea hard with 6-foot swells slamming him like concrete. He surfaced gasping, forcing his hands through survival procedures, practiced dozens of times, release harness, inflate vest, activate emergency beacon, while above. Lanway's F-22 orbited at 5,000 feet, maintaining cap until an MH-6 Seahawk appeared 27 minutes later with rescue swimmer dropping into churning water and strong hands pulling Sullivan aboard. He was alive, which was more than many fighter pilots could say after high-altitude ejection from damaged aircraft. 72 hours later, Sullivan returned to Palawan, cleared for flight duty with bruised ribs. Finding Lewis reviewing gun camera footage where her AIM-9X tracked toward a J-20 before impact and flash. Commands calling this tactical victory: 3 Chinese fighters destroyed versus 1 F-22 damaged. They're talking medals and commendations, using it as propaganda about American air superiority. But I keep thinking about those Chinese pilots who made decisions just like we did and 2 died for it. Lewis replied, "It wasn't random. We trained for this hundreds of times. We executed better tactics. That's why we're here having this conversation." 3 days after ejection, Sullivan stood on the flight line watching a replacement F-22 undergo pre-flight inspection. And in 6 hours, he'd fly it over the same waters where he'd nearly died. "Ready to go back up?" Lewis asked. "Ready as I'll ever be. We won the tactical engagement, 3 kills versus 1 damaged aircraft, but strategically nothing changed. Chinese fighters are still out there testing boundaries. We bought time-proved capabilities, maybe deterred them temporarily, but the fundamental problem remains. 2 superpowers competing for dominance, both unwilling to yield, both capable of escalating beyond what anyone wants." Lewis asked, "We do our jobs, we fly the missions, we maintain readiness, we hope politicians figure out solutions before we fight for real. And if they don't, then we do what we've always done: we fight, we win, and we try to survive long enough to see what comes next." The replacement F-22 sat ready on the ramp with weapons loaded, systems checked, prepared for whatever came next, and somewhere across those waters, Chinese pilots were conducting their own pre-flight inspections, preparing for the same patrol carrying the same weapons, following the same orders, because the cycle continued since neither side could afford to blink first. If this breakdown of modern aerial combat fascinated you, hit subscribe for more real military operations analysis, and drop a comment telling me whether you think thrust, vectoring, or pilot skill made the difference in this engagement, because in the end, it's not the aircraft that wins the fight, it's the person flying it.